Welcome, bienvenidos everyone. My name is Jesus Maldonado Reyes. I'm the president of the Prospanica Milwaukee Chapter. I'm excited today to present this event today, focused on Latina professionals. And the name of our event is Rule Breaking Strategies for Successful Latinas. And we're hosting Color Forward podcast group. And at this point, I would like to introduce you to our moderator, Rosa Aviles, based in New York City. And she's a Prospanica member of the New York chapter, and currently she serves as the community service coordinator for the Yonkers public library system. And she's also a professor of the communication at the LIU Post University. At this moment, I'd like to introduce you to Rosa Aviles.
I'm good.
Sure?
Thank you. Yeah.
Positive?
Yeah.
Right. Welcome and thank you. We might want to actually mute ourselves just to be mindful that we're not interrupting while other people are speaking, please. And thank you, Jesus Maldonado. I used to be a member of the Prospanica New York chapter. Since then, I have done amazing things and other amazing things. I really enjoyed my time at Prospanica New York. However, I'm no longer a member. I'm way too busy with my job as community services in the city of Yonkers and strategizing to help various organizations across the platforms to collaborate and do what we've come here today to do, right? Rule-breaking strategies for successful Latinas and individuals across the board, really. So first, I want to thank you all for joining us today. And I want to thank Jesus Maldonado, president of Prospanica Milwaukee, for bringing us all together in this conversation that I think is seriously needed these days, especially with the transitions that we've all been dealing with, challenging obstacles. And we have an amazing panel to introduce you to today, Latinas who have really proven throughout their journey of success that breaking rules and changing the strategies works. So that's what they're here to share with us today. So let me introduce you first to this amazing panel that you see in front of you. They are the voices, the beautiful voices of Color Forward podcast. And it's a podcast that you'll learn more about later on in this presentation. But I highly recommend listening to it because it's very diverse and they have multiple leaders that come to this podcast to further empower us and talk about other strategies that might work for one person and might work for another person. So first, let me introduce you to the amazing Dr. Merari Simeon. She is a proven and celebrated human resources executive who is community-minded and people-invested, hence why she's here with us today, right? She's a wife, a mother, a co-founder of Color Forward Podcast, an author, a board member, and Kingdom Work advocate. She holds a doctorate in strategic leadership. Her leadership expertise includes talent management, diversity, equity and inclusion, leadership consulting, cultural change, executive coaching, and of course, public speaking. She is joining us today all the way from Texas. Alisa Manjarrez, she is a vision producer at the Happy Cactus. I love this. You already know, it sounds like California, right? Where powerful women gain clarity to cast a vision, creating their strategies and making it happen, executing their visions. She's also an executive coach and she's former tech marketing executive, partnering with clients to lead global distributed teams with confidence, build high-performing habits for success, and leveraging their strengths in multiple environments. On the creative side, Alisa specializes in award-winning digital storytelling. So she's here today to give us some stories and create those visions in our mind to help us with these rule-breaking strategies. She's a brand strategist, global marketing and product launch campaigns, and she's joining us, like I said, all the way from California. Rosa Santos, also co-founder of Color Forward. She's the co-host on Color Forward podcast. I have actually a very different bio for her. She wanted me to read a very short bio for her, but I think it's important to actually say what these women of power have done in their lives and where they've been. She studied a lot in Spain, and so she brings a very diverse rule-breaking strategy to the platform today, which is very exciting. So prior to her current role, Rosa held regional and global human resource roles for BP, the World Bank, and the University of Chicago. She holds many degrees. She has a master's degree in organizational management, development, and leadership, master's degree in sociology and politics from the University of Salamanca in Spain. And she also got her bachelor's degree in Spain in labor law. She's a certified executive coach as well. She holds her own practice where she also coaches a wide array of senior global executives from the United Nations, the World Bank, and the Inter-American Development Bank. So I am pleased to welcome all of our wonderful panelists. Round of applause for your successes.
Thank you for having us.
So we're going to jump right into rule-breaking strategies today. And foremost, the first question that we're going to have, the platform is going to be a little bit different than most presentations. We want it to be innovative to keep your attention so that you don't get bored. We know everyone is Zoom fatigued, so thank you for even being here throughout all of this, right? We're going to have a couple of videos from other Latinas globally who are going to also talk about their rule-breaking strategies. So it's part of our platform today. But the first question is one of the biggest challenges that I think that individuals face today, especially women, Latina women, is we work so hard through our educational careers and we really focus and hone in on, what it is that we want to do. Sometimes that can get convoluted through our cultural experiences, our societal experiences, and we get caught in the interweaving of all of it. So the first question is finding a position, right, that suits what you want to do, ladies, is difficult, as I just mentioned. At what point in your educational or professional careers did you say to yourself, that's what I want to do with my life? And did you face any obstacles in achieving those goals? Anyone can go for it.
All right, Merari, go for it.
Oh, thanks. Hello, everybody. So
Hi,
excited to be here with all of you. Thank you for joining us, first of all, and for having us, Prospanica. I would love for everybody to also get engaged in the chat. I know Latinas, and if you're anything like me, I want to be involved in the conversation. So as we're answering, please give us your feedback and your thoughts as well, because we can continue to learn from each other. But to answer your question, Rose, I think I at least think about things a little bit different, right? So first, I believe that we must lean on the things we enjoy doing and how you can make money doing what you love. Now, I was fortunate early on in my life. A teacher recognized my gift to lead and empower others. So she pushed me to be a human resources executive. And when I think about it, I've been empowering people since high school. I just had no idea. It wasn't until we launched this podcast when I realized empowering people fills me with joy. It fills my soul, right? So I was so busy, I believe, doing. So if we put it in a dance perspective, if you're anything like me and loves to dance, I was so busy dancing and making the moves that I never stood to watch from the balcony and see the beauty and joy of what I actually do. So I really believe that sometimes we have to really challenge ourselves or challenge the rules or challenge the thinking and look at things a little bit different to really get to enjoy and really discover what you're doing. You may be doing it for a while already. It's just society may say, this is the way you're supposed to feel, think, or even want. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. So
that's great. Alisa?
One of the rules that we've spent the last year studying rule breakers, and all of these multicultural women who have quote unquote made it, we've asked them, how did you do it? And one of my favorite rules that we've seen over and over again that I personally relate to is, if it doesn't exist, create it. And I've never felt like I fit into any role ever. And I don't think one time I've ever read a job description that was like, yes, that's so me. Today, I did create my role and I did create my business, but throughout my career working for other people, I've always created my role. I've told CEOs, managers, whoever I was reporting to, I've said, this is what I can do. And this is how I think I can serve your company. And this is how I can make you money. And so they've created roles for me. And as I've gone along, if there's been something that I haven't liked, I go back to my manager, my supervisor, my CEO, whoever it is in that role above me, the decision maker. And I've said, I've written so many proposals, had so many discussions saying, can you make this role for me? And it got to the point probably midway into my career where people were actually starting to come to me and say, we created a role for you. So create what doesn't exist. If it's not out there, you can create it.
Wow, that sounds terrifying, honestly, creating your own role. So, and we'll talk about fear later on in this discussion. Awesome. Thank you, Alisa. Rosa.
Oh, it's funny you said that, because I want to pick it up from what you said in terms of what you study, right? Or what you were preparing yourself through university or college, what you study and what you end up wanting to do or doing, right? And to your point, I think for me, and it's funny that you mentioned all the degrees that I kind of, my son says, collected along the way. For me, it was a matter of, like, honestly, not knowing from the beginning what I wanted to do, right? But knowing what brought me joy and what grounded myself, right? So very early on.
So, I guess, okay, so the meeting would be more.
Oh, Isabel. Oh, there you go. So, for me, it was important that I would do something that would provide really self-fulfillment and independence, and especially financial independence. That was very important for me early on. How I would get there and what to do, I think it was really part of the process of self-discovery and becoming, right? Mm. And to Merari's point, and I was reflecting about this as we were coming into having this conversation. I remember very early on, and I was talking to my son recently about it, as a teenager, I had all kinds of jobs. And I was very surprised how parents brought their kids to me to talk to them about how to create possibility for themselves. Obviously, I didn't talk this way back in the day, but I remember getting like a lot of money in order to get kids to actually sign up for the right courses that they're going to go into in the baccalaureate period and then into college. So there was always for me, there was this sense of I have to do something that is going to allow me to enable others to be successful. Then obviously that has translated throughout the years into what I do today, and especially this passion of mine and ours that we share here about advancing women. But it's to your point, it's a little bit terrifying because you are, especially when you're starting, it's tough to look at this white canvas and everybody's telling you, wow, you need to go paint it, right, from scratch and what that would look like. So one of my favorite rules that we have is don't be afraid to change course, right? This idea of change course without hesitation, because things evolve, you evolve, and things around you will evolve, but be grounded in what's important for you.
Perfect. That's the perfect segue into this video by our first Latina, who is one of our first video presenters, who's talking about her way of rule-breaking strategies that helped her in success.
Hello, everyone. My name is Judith Garcia Galliana. I'm a Senior Vice President in 3M Company, and I proudly serve on Prospanica's National Board of Directors as Secretary. My number one tip or rule breaking that I would like to share with you today is not to be afraid of lateral moves. Your professional career is not a straight line up, but rather is a zigzag up. And against the advice of many people telling me not to take a job because it was not a promotion, I felt that if that job was taking me out of my comfort zone, giving me more capabilities, different perspective, would prepare me better for my dream, to achieve my dream. And my dream being to become an executive, international executive, leading international teams, leading large global businesses, which I've been doing for several years now. So really, I felt all these stretched opportunities taking me out of my normal path or my comfort zone really prepared me for the job I have now. Thank you very much for listening, and have a good day.
Thank you, Judith. Beautiful. So that's perfect. You guys, all three of these panelists, Latinas, have just discussed, commonalities, and fear is at the top of them, right? In terms of transitioning, I like that she talked about her comfort zone. And I know I kind of gave the panelists a heads up on questions I would ask, but I'm gonna break a rule here, and I'm gonna switch up some of these questions right now, because I love the flow that this is going in. Rosa talked about, the fear and overcoming that fear, and that comfort zone is something that we don't even realize that we're in most of the time. So for the panelists, the question is, at what point did you realize I have to break out of or peel some layers off of yourself to really strategize something in reaching that goal? And how did that make you feel uncomfortable? Were there any rules that you had to guaranteed break in order to achieve that? And it can make us feel very uncomfortable.
I can start. I would say the first rule that I broke is just that, stepping out of the comfort zone, stepping out of what society or even culturally as a family people see a Latina woman do or be. Right? Is your place at home, or is your place, not going to college or whatever it may be. So I believe that in everything that I've done, in order for me to be where I am today, each step I have to be uncomfortable, to the point that I really think if I say to myself, I'm sorry, let me step back. This is a rule I put on myself. If I'm not uncomfortable, then I'm not doing something right. So to me, I could tell a million stories, but the main point I want to get across is, if you are comfortable where you sit, then you're not going to continue to grow. So it's really looking at your vision, your dreams, and knowing if you're good where you're at, or if you limit it yourself in your imagination, your career, your life. It doesn't matter what it is. The moment that we're comfortable, that's the moment where we limit it ourselves and our own potential.
Yeah. Let me bring a perspective that I hold very dear. And in fact, Alisa and I were talking about this recently, is think of your career as your business, right? It is a business. And as such, I think there is a way of strategizing behind it, right? And sometimes you have certain goals and certain milestones to get to those career goals. And along the way, you're going to have to take some risks if you really truly want to fulfill into that overall, if you like, business of yours, which is your career. And what I would say, that when you think about it that way, then you'll know what makes you uncomfortable. You'll know what makes you, not just comfortable, but what differentiates you. And sometimes that differentiator is what is going to allow you to actually get into the next milestone. For some folks, being uncomfortable is, as we just saw, and as Merari talks about, is when you know that you're growing, right? Is when you know that you are stepping into that risk and that space to do something that maybe you didn't think you could do, right? And you're allowing yourself to regain that power for you to say, if she can do it, I can do it, kind of a thing. At the same time, the other side is, to what extent can you use sometimes some of your superpower that you feel super comfortable with in order to actually propel you and make it that differentiator? Because you know that you'll do, I call it business development. I honestly do. I call it, okay, this is my business development. I know it's a foot on the door. I know how to do this in my sleep. I'm gonna do it to gain credibility, to get some wins, and then I can then propel myself to take those risks that right now they feel really frightening, to your point, Rose. So if we think about it that way, I think it helps to kind of dissect that fear a little bit, and then take it and approach it in a more palatable way for some. I don't know, Alisa, if that relates to you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with leveraging what you're really good at and leaning into that. And sometimes, there's this phrase that I love. It's not bragging if it's true. And I think that we get, just like we were saying, even before this panel, Rose was saying, well, I don't really want to have my bio out there. And Rosa was saying, maybe we can make it a little bit shorter. So it's an ongoing struggle for a lot of us to really talk about all the amazing things that we've done. And one of my favorite ways of getting comfortable with discomfort is practice. And I have found that it doesn't really matter what you're practicing. If you practice being uncomfortable, you start to build that muscle over and over again. And what I would challenge you all today to think about is what makes you uncomfortable. If it is touting, I can tout my achievements all day long. I'm very comfortable, but I've practiced a lot. I've been in different groups where I talk about it. But I think about other places where I'm not comfortable. And recently, it was a Sunday afternoon, I was watching TV and I was resting all day. And I felt very uncomfortable because I had a lot of work to do. But I was like, I know I need a rest. And it got to the point, I mean, I can be lazy. I have lazy days and I don't mind that. But I had this day where I was really, really resting and I could feel how different it was. And I was talking to my coach about it and he said, what if you could lean into that discomfort? Like, where's your edge when it comes to rest? How much can you rest to the point where it gets really uncomfortable? And so that's where I'm challenging myself today. So I think no matter what your challenge is, whatever feels uncomfortable, just keep pushing, push yourself to that edge, because eventually the edge is going to get deeper. Maybe in 5 months, you're going to see me on a 4-month vacation. I don't know, but I'm practicing rest and I'm practicing getting to my edge.
And that's hard to do, balance it, right? Before we move forward with the next video speaker, I want to also thank you for giving us an example, Alisa. Rosa and Merari, do you have examples of when you had to take a risk and feel that uncomfort? Specific example.
Yeah, absolutely. Specific example is just even going for my doctorate degree, right? Being a mother, an executive, a wife, a caretaker to my elder parents, it was uncomfortable. However, this was a dream. This was something that I wanted to do. So while I knew that there was going to be challenges and while I knew the journey was not going to be easy, I was ready for the uncomfort. I think one of the things that we don't give ourselves enough credit for is our resiliency. And I believe that everybody that is on this line today, if you're here today, you have been resilient. You may not think so, but you have. And it was important for me to break the rule of thinking I have too much on my plate and I can't do this. So my dreams are going to have to be set aside because now I need to be all these other 10 things. Well, I made that a priority and I was very uncomfortable every single time. But I made it. I'm here. I'm Dr. Merari Simeon because I walked into that fear, into that uncomfort zone. And I said, no matter how hard it gets, I'm going to keep moving forward. And guess what? My husband still loves me. My kids love me. My parents still consider me their daughter. And I'm a doctor and a badass executive. So I don't know what else to say. Walk into that uncomfort zone and make it happen.
And get those rewards. Yes.
Yes.
Rosa?
I think I have so many examples. And in fact, I encourage you guys to listen to the podcast because I share some of them, some of my stories. But I do believe that every step and every decision that I have made throughout my career, my life, has entailed taking risks and every single step doing something that was against what others projected on me. But a recent one, for instance, or not so recent, but moving, and we were talking about lateral moves and moving. For me, taking a pause, inverted commas, taking a pause to rethink my career, coming off of working for the World Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank, and really not knowing what I wanted to do, whether I wanted to go back to corporate America that I had left at 7 years prior, and had been working in Washington, D.C. in international multilateral organizations with people all over the world, very different kinds of stake or shareholder value, to really figuring out, do I want to continue down that path? Do I want to fully fleshed and stand up my own business? Do I want to re-enter corporate America and what that would look like? And I actually took a very different kind of what I called a resting path, which was I joined the University of Chicago for a couple of years to truly just allow myself to really get into that space of, again, self-discovery and redirection, and really to infuse my soul with more studying and applying my practice in a very different kind of institution and environment. So doing that was a huge risk because, as you get older, that was a completely different path to take. And it was very much not the right thing to do if you wanted then to go back into corporate, because it was harder than those who I consulted with at the time to then explain how will you do the jump coming back from higher education into corporate. That was a huge risk for me, but that was what I needed at the time. And those were, to Alisa's, that was my edge. I had never, ever worked in higher education, and especially in a very demanding business school environment at the time. But I went in with a very specific mandate, which kept me going. And in fact, while I did that, it really helped me develop a great women's program at the time in that school, continuing my passion and putting that to practice, really enable a lot of leaders with whom I'm really good friends with right now. I mean, I continue to be friends with and be connected with, and then allowed me to, with time, to choose exactly what I wanted to do next. So that's one example.
What a process. And I'm sure that was a very lengthy, uncomfortable process. And thank you, panelists, for all of your examples. I think that everyone in this meeting would agree that it sounds like very helpful and insightful information to know that we're not the only ones struggling with these challenges, right? It's across the board. And that's why we're here today. So let's go on to our next video from Iliana.
Hello, Ileana Webb, Prospanica DC President, and I want to share with you one of my many rules I have broken to be where I am today. And one of them is not to listen to the family and culture and to pursue my goals. I was able to finish my bachelor degree and master's degree with the support of the family, but not finding any job in Puerto Rico that was geared to what I studied. I decided to move to the United States without any support of family. It was through Prospanica that I was able to build my extended family and keep growing personally and professionally. So keep resilient.
We talked about this, resilience. Her story is very powerful and moving, and it happens all too often. We at times have to leave the strongest support system that we have, which is our family, our friends, what we've grown up in. So ladies, tell us about a time when you found yourself with a different support system, or rather even not having a strong support system. How did that help you or not help you in obtaining your goals?
Okay, we're gonna have to change the order because I always go first. I'm gonna change the rules. I'm gonna pick Rosa this time. Go ahead, Rosa.
How do I answer this? Because I think it has a lot to do as well with how we're brought up, right? And I think it has to do a lot with we had a guest in our podcast a while back ago that talked about the inner fire, right? And I think the example that we just had now is an absolute example of inner fire, determination, and will. I think everybody in this call has that. And one of the things that I've been talking about quite a bit through this last year in the pandemic and on the podcast is how this resiliency muscle has prepared us to face the pandemic in a very different way than for others who never had to face the challenges that Ileana just shared with us, right? So I think there is a combination of how you were prepared from sometimes even from the womb to have that inner fire to do whatever you are faced with or whatever your goals are. And at the same time, Rose, I think there's also an acknowledgement, and especially for us here, I think we're told so much, you can do it. Don't rely on anybody, keep moving, go out and get a job, make sure that you're successful, and then you provide, right, for your community, for your family and all this, that sometimes it feels very lonely, right? And it feels like you have to do it all on your own. And sometimes it becomes so hard. It becomes so hard that if anything, I tell you, I've been Eliana myself. I when I was very young, I came home. I think I was around my son's age. I don't even know how my parents did this for me. And I said to my mom and dad, I am going to get on a train and I'm going to travel around Europe. And my parents said, great, as long as you have the money to do it, you can go do it. So I found myself a job, I got that money, and I go home with the ticket and I said, can you drive me to the train station because I'm leaving? My parents were really surprised, but they let me do it. And I did it all, that's kind of like how I've conducted myself. But I tell you, proving to everybody that you can, it's great. However, in hindsight, don't do it alone, because you'll have so many folks who will want to support you, who will want to enable you to help you achieve what you want. And this kind of, because I think we all have it, pride sometimes, right? There's this pride. Be proud, but share it and have others help you out, because otherwise it can be very daunting and it can be exhausting, and you may not get to achieve what you want if you don't enroll others into wanting to really share that success, your success with the world.
Great, thank you, Rosa. And I'm gonna switch it up per Dr. Merari's request, and I'm gonna go to Alisa. Now you're going last, okay?
All right. I was ready.
Alisa, when you answered, can you also, a question that I came up with when Rosa was speaking is, not everyone is fortunate enough to have a strong support system or have parents who don't whip their behind before they walk out that door. So do you think it's even possible to accomplish those goals without a strong support system? And did you have a strong support system yourself?
I had a strong familial support system. Both of my parents were very encouraging. There were definitely times where I resented them for not knowing how to encourage me or where to push me. I wanted to be pushed and challenged. And my parents were the types that were like so happy with everything I did. And so I actually, when I was in high school, I had two best friends who had very strict parents who had all these, now looking back, I don't know how good it was, but I saw the expectations that they put on their daughters, and I just took them for myself. And so my parents didn't know that I needed to be in National Honor Society, but my friends' parents did. So I just did what I took their expectations, and I had the love and support from my parents, but I took what I didn't have. And I feel like, going back to that rule of create what doesn't exist, I feel like I've done that all along the way, even to the point now in my career. I moved to a new city. I found friends, and I didn't have the professional support that I really wanted. So I went and looked for people. I found, I have stayed connected. Rosa and I went to graduate school together 10 years ago, and we've stayed connected. I need her in my life. And then I met Merari, and I pushed through to build a relationship with her. And a couple of years ago, I got laid off from my job, and it was one of the best days of my life because I got to see the fruit of all the work that I had done to build my support system. And everyone I texted that day, I was a mess, but everyone I texted me what I needed to hear, or got on the phone and called me. But it took a lot of work to build that support system. And I'm still consistently making efforts to keep friendships, keep relationships, find mentors. I've been very proactive, but it's just been a beautiful thing to reap the results of not doing things alone.
What about you, Merari? Was there anything different about your support system?
Yes. So for me, I grew up without mentors. Parents didn't speak the language because I came here in high school, and I'm the first one to graduate high school, the first one to graduate college, the first to be in corporate America. So I didn't have that support system from the family or even friends, right, at the time. So I had to challenge myself. And this is the one rule that I would say is I would challenge everyone to define what does a strong support system mean to you? And do you need a support system with all the bells and whistles that society or communities define? And then second, I would say own your power. What are your strengths? And leverage those strengths to get to where you need to get to, while at the same time you build the support system. I agree with Alicia and Rosa that you have to work on that support system. But if you get to a place where you don't have it, leverage the power that you have, the gifts that you have, and use that and move forward until you're able to then restore that support system. But it's so critical. It was so critical for me to realize, you know what? I don't have a mentor right now. Yes, I need to look for one. Do I really need a sponsor today? Do I need all those bells and whistles? Do I need my parents to know where to guide me? Do I need these rules? Some people need all that. Some people don't. I leverage my resilience and just my history of things that I've been through to continue to move me forward. And now I realize I flex that support system. Like right now, my biggest support system while going through school was my husband and the kids. As long as I had them as a support system, nothing else mattered. I can make it. So I would say flex on that support system. Yes, build the network. But for me, I worked a lot in my own power and my strengths in order to keep me moving forward until I was able to build a system that supported me.
Beautifully said, ladies. Thank you. And let's go to our next third video of tonight's.
Hello.
No, there we go. Lucia.
My name is Lucia Manzo, and I'm the GM head of US operations at HiveBright. Now, rule breaking. When I think about rule breaking, there isn't one particular rule that sticks out, but rather a quote from Emerson. Do not go where their path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. In my career, I've heard at times, in order to get from point A to point B, you should follow certain steps. And while one should always be mindful of advice and experience because it can have fruitful learnings, past performance doesn't guarantee future results. Sometimes you may actually be the first to do something. Sometimes your path to success will vary widely from your peers. I found that having a strong support system, a clear understanding of why a goal is important or valuable to you or your business, and a deep belief in yourself can help carve a path where there might not have been one. I've seen this come to fruition as I transitioned careers from finance to technology, redirected market approaches for sales and marketing teams, and in countless other decision-making for both personal and professional endeavors. One may see it as breaking the rules, or as I see it, simply building paths that lead to opportunities for both oneself and others.
Fantastic. Now, Alisa, we know you created your own path. So I'm going to go to Rosa first on this question. What I like about what Lucia mentions is she's in this transition. She goes from finance to technology. And I think that in itself is a huge rule breaker with Latinas in the Latin community, period. Sometimes even frowned upon very frequently, right? Especially by our family. Oh my God, what are you doing? You know, you wasted all this time. Maybe it wasn't a waste of time. Maybe it was a learning experience to drive us to the next path, right? And create the next path. So the question is, did any of you face a transition in your careers or even in your personal lives that you found yourself unhappy with where you were and knew that you needed to make that transition? And the second question is, what helped you in that transition? Can you tell us a little bit about that decision-making process?
Yeah. So my perspective and point of view is that we're all in transition all the time. And my personal motto around that is always, I'm in the business of creating possibility. And I think when we're in transition, you have two choices, either seeing the glass half full or half empty, right? I choose to see it all the time half full, as Alisa very well knows. So I liked what Lucia said in regards to the paths that you create to open up new avenues or new possibilities, because that's absolutely the right way to approach your transition. And it's as simple as, are we looking, right? Sometimes the feedback that we get is that is an issue or it's a problem rather than creating a new opportunity. So seeing it always from that angle helps lift yourself up and not find yourself like going into a downward spiral. And as I said, I still think of myself as being in transition, and as having to create and add to my path in a constant basis. But in terms of specifics, I've had many instances where I changed, right? I was, as I was growing up in a multinational company over 20 years ago, it was very clear that the path that I was going to take was going to be in human resources, right? Human resources, but a very specific kind of human resources. And I chose actually at the time and I had a very successful start to my career. I was hired by a company that allowed me to explore all the different functions of that organization through their graduate program. But I was in this very specific path of leading a human resources function and teams. And then I decided that was, at the time, only I knew that I was going to go back to it. But at the time, I decided that, one, I didn't think that was what I wanted to do. And two, I wanted to make sure that I understood the business. So in fact, I started in a clothing retail multinational, and I went into fashion buying, of all things. And wow, a human resources person going and buying textiles was not necessarily very well seen within, and super young. I was very young. I was in my mid to late 20s. But I persisted, and I just wanted what I thought. I was just attracted by all what that entailed. My mother made clothes for us since we were little. I didn't grow up in we didn't have a lot of money, so my mom would make clothes for us. So I was always fascinated by that. I took that risk. It was so enriching, so much fun learning about the textile industry and engineering and all that, only to find myself again transitioning back to actually sales. So I was a sales associate for a long time, to then come back all full circle to human resources. So for me, it wasn't necessarily straight up. It was, as I said, for me, it's more of like, I look at it more like as an ongoing circle or spiral, that each opportunity is bringing up a new possibility of growth for myself.
And it sounds like your mother, sorry for interrupting, and now my phone's interrupting me, but it sounds like your mother was a part of that process.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's funny because when you say like wasting your time, my parents used to talk about that all the time. Like, make sure you don't, and I have a hard time actually sitting down and even enjoying a movie, because I have my mother in the back of my mind saying like, could you be doing something else right now? But it is true. I mean, it's true in that sense of, what are you learning? For me, my education was all about what are you learning and what you bringing to the table, and how are you growing in any of those transitions that I actually took. And if I could articulate what that was and how I was to utilize what I learned into my next opportunity, what I call transferable, what are the skills that you're transferring and the expertise that you're transferring to another either industry altogether. I went from retail clothing to energy and solar panels, right? So, I mean, it couldn't be more different, right? And from there to a trading house. So it's, but what is it that you're bringing along the way that you're building, and you're building your toolkit and sets that you can apply to your next opportunity.
Right. Like you said, it's an evolving thing, evolution, Merari.
Yes. For me, it's a little bit different, and I'm going to bring you a different perspective. While I love what I do, and I believe that I fall in love with it, more each day as I look at it, at empowering women and empowering people. But where it came to me was one day I woke up and I hated what I did. I hated my job. I hated everybody around it. And really what I ended up realizing is that I was blaming. Let me back that up. I had not dealt with my past. I had not dealt with some experiences, and I was blaming all the things that were around me on my unhappiness. So at the end of the day, I lacked peace. And I was about to lose everything that I worked so hard for. And that to me was my education, was my job, just all these things, because I lacked peace. And it really turned out that I didn't deal with some past experiences growing up. I didn't forgive some people that did me wrong throughout my career and throughout my life. And it wasn't until I was able to really take that time to do self-care, self-well-being, that I was able to love again what I do. And the reason I'm saying that, because I think sometimes we're like, hey, I wasted my time doing this, or I did this for nothing. And I think sometimes we got to take time, like I had to do for myself, and really say, do I really hate this? Or is this just a covering for all the other things that I don't want to face? I was running away from problems, and those problems were distorting my view of what really matters. It was distorting my view of a career and education that I worked so hard for. And when we don't deal with those things, we could end up ruining our careers. In my case, I turned to alcohol and sometimes drugs. I turned to a lot of things. And as an executive, when that's happening in your life, you're trying to run a business and you're depressed, those things are real. And I think those are things that we don't talk about in our lives. But if you want one real rule-breaking strategy, face what you're going through internally. Take care of you first, so that then you can do everything else that you work so hard for. I have no doubt that everybody on this call is resilient and has the strength they need to achieve their dreams. But you have to break that rule that we don't talk about the things that are hurting us, that are bothering us. We need to take care of us. Otherwise, you could have been like me and basically ruined everything you worked so hard for. Once I was able to do that, Rose, I was able to realize I love what I do. I needed to take care of some of the things I had hidden in the closet that I didn't want anybody to see. But the reality was that they were still in my mind, they were still in my heart, and they were haunting me every day.
Wow, that I completely resonate with that, Merari. Thank you so much for being transparent with us. And I think also, Alisa, maybe you can talk a little bit about this, being able to be transparent with one another and not be fearful or fear that somebody's going to judge you, especially from Latina to Latina.
Right.
We need this, right? That's why this platform is here. Talk a little bit about maybe your experience in that. How does community impact that?
I think that so often we don't talk about the messy middle, which is kind of what Merari was talking about, right? We talk about transition and we all hear about where you were before, and then all of a sudden, everything came together. And I think for me, I feel like I'm always having an identity crisis. Like, who am I? What do I want? Where am I going? And yes, eventually I get to that place where like, I know exactly what I want and I go and create it and I go for it, right? But there's this other place in between the two other areas. And that is where, for me, there's self-doubt, there's loneliness, and all these negative things. I can talk myself down very easily. And I think that a lot of that has been magnified during this pandemic. And, I'm single, I live alone. I'm alone with my thoughts a lot. I have been this last year. And what I realized is I can go so deep in that middle because, and I think we're all kind of still in the middle, right? We're not quite out of the clear yet. But in that middle, what I found is that the ideas and negative things that I'm thinking, as soon as I call a friend, it's like it starts to disappear. And that big thing that I was worried about, or that big doubt that I had, or fear, as soon as I just pick up the phone and talk about it, either I have different friends that I go to for different things. I have the friends that are like, yeah, girl, you got this, right? And then I have the other friends that are like, oh my gosh, me too. And so I've kind of figured out what I need in the moment. And at the end of the day, just calling anybody and telling anybody what I'm thinking, it's hard. And I feel uncomfortable. I have people in my life that I can trust, but showing them that side of me, like the side of me that you don't really see on social media or in events like this, I don't want anyone to know about my insecurities, right? But when I call a friend, I mean, that's all. That's my biggest piece of advice is call a friend, because I have seen how that power of community and being with other people in your mess in the middle has really been a huge, powerful experience for me.
Right. And that just brings, go ahead, Rosa.
No, what I was going to say is this aspect. I mean, all of this is this aspect that you mentioned, Rose, about judgment, right? I think how hard it is for all of us to suspend judgment when somebody actually comes calling. And if anything, when that happens, I think we need to be very purposeful in the way that we listen, because I think listening is so powerful and we don't exercise it enough. Right? One of the things that we used to say throughout the pandemic when we were doing the podcast is just call 5 people, right? Call 5 people who you haven't called in a while and just check in. And what I'll say is just check in without that judgment, just checking and listen, because you'll never know who you're going to be able to really support, help, and save if you do that. And sometimes we get so inwardly focused in wanting to achieve our own success that we forget or project our own miscomings, right, on others. And if we just exercise that listening in the community, in our friends, our family, I think things would be so much better.
Right. Thanks, Rosa. And sometimes we can't exercise it when we're driven by fear and we don't even know that, right? So let's go to the next video.
Hi, I'm Claudia Sloan. I'm an entrepreneur and also President Emeritus of the Prospanica Silicon Valley chapter. My last traditional job was Chief of Marcom and Public Information Officer, which was an executive level management role in government. As for what rule I broke the most, when I heard things like, that's what we're always done here, or we don't ask, I had to ask. Figure out what to do about it. The impact that had on my life, can't say it was always easy, but it got me into projects where I had the opportunity to learn, help, and empower people through positive change. And I really love that. It also made me better at solving problems. But most importantly, I think it influenced my leadership style to foster a culture of change and progress everywhere I go.
Wonderfully said, right? She talked about fear, and we were just discussing this notion of, being able to ask the hard questions or not because we're fearful. So last question of the afternoon, and I'm not going to choose who goes first. You're going to have to make this decision among yourselves here. Think a little bit about what exactly it means to ask the hard questions, or even feel a level of comfort in asking those hard questions and finding your table at the seat, because that's still a very real thing, right? You created your own seats at your podcast, but what about when you're in your place of business, or even sitting at the table with your family members who have these opposing views of what you decide to do with your life? So tell us a little bit about that notion of speaking up and asking the hard questions?
Yeah, I would say for me, it was really understanding what made me happy and what were the consequences if I went for my doctorate, like let's just say in this example, or if I didn't. The same way that I had to ask myself, you know, what were the consequences if I kept doing what I was doing or if I stopped from a career perspective. So I look at it from both personal and career. To your point, Rose, they apply. If you do not understand or you do not know what matters to you as an individual, then you're going to live your life trying to please everybody else around you. So I go based on my values. If there's no seat at the table for me, but I know that's a value that I stand for. Number one, empower women, speak up for women, speak up for Latinas, whatever that is, then I know that whether I'm comfortable or not, I am going to fight for that seat at the table, or I'm going to just bring the chair right with me. The way that it may happen, it may not be the usual way, like put yourself on the invite calendar. No, I may have to be strategic about going to that meeting, right? I may have to speak to different people, maybe get to know the admin because that's who's going to put me on that invite, whatever it may be. I would just say challenge yourself. When people say, find your seat at the table or build your own table, it doesn't look the same for everyone. But also, when you know what matters to you, you don't fight for every seat at the table. You're strategically about the seat that you're fighting for. And that's kind of the way that I look at it. And I'll give you a perfect example. I joined a board about 2 years ago, and I was very strategic. I said, I want to join this board because I want to bring more women of color on this board. If you want me, great. If you don't, I'm good. But at the end, and they, they hired me for the board. But at the end of the day, you have to know what you stand for and what you're going for. Otherwise, you're going to be bouncing back and forth and not know exactly what it is. So for me, knowing what I want, knowing my values, knowing what I stand for keeps it simple. This is the thing that I'm fighting for, no matter what gets in the way.
I'll go. I couldn't agree more in terms of being strategic and know what you want. And I'll say, be tactical as you're being strategic. And tactical sometimes is, and I look at it this way. I used to coach somebody that had a hard time actually doing this. But I said, you need to take a third eye when you're at that table, whatever the table is. Take a third eye out and look at yourself, look at the situation, assess what's going on. And my question is, are you being seen or not? Are you being heard? If you're not being heard, why is that? Are you actually talking? Are you translating your thoughts into words that people can listen? You might, but maybe somebody else is actually picking up your thoughts and your ideas. And if that is the case, if that is bothering you, what do you need to do, right? And I know in those situations, it's not easy, right? It's not easy, but I think, and we talked about practice, we need to practice. You might start with just assessing, right? Assessing and really defining for yourself, how are you gonna show up? And it might be just by first asking questions. That is the best way of starting to show up and starting to be invisible and being heard. Just ask a question. Maybe first time is one, and practice it. What if someone is taking off your eye? And I think we've all been in these situations where you had a brilliant idea, you said it, nobody paid attention, the guy next to you says it in a different way, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, that's awesome. And you go like, oh, that's what I thought, but I didn't say anything. What if the next time that happens, you say like, John, that's exactly what I just said. And I am glad that you brought it up and you explained it in that way so everybody could understand. But let me just broaden that thinking, since I had that thought, right? So it's that sense of practicing, but going back to like, why are you doing it? What's important, and how strategically you want to show up for to do it. I tell you, it's not easy. We talk, Alisa, Merari, and I talk a lot about personal instances, even today, right? That you would think we've got years of experience, we have all the, the toolkits and all, and we still come out sometimes of like some situations in which we couldn't bring ourselves to interject or to really say the right thing in the right moment. But I'll tell you, we continue to practice. We continue to bring our voice. And I say, you need to use your voice because your voice is valuable. And if you're at the table, it's because you need to be there. And I always say, make sure that you leave that table, that room, that conversation. There is something there, there's something new because you were there. If you cannot, because otherwise, is this sense of what is going to be different coming out of that conversation because I was in the room, because I was sitting in at that table, or I was part of that conversation. So I think that it's or at least that's how I go in. I'm very intentional. I'm very purposeful. So being strategic, not what you want, and at the same time come up with your own tactics.
I want to reiterate how scary it is to do that. A couple of years ago, I was given a seat at the table. I just showed up and someone plopped me from here and put me over here and said, lead this multi-million-dollar software launch, even though you don't have a software background. And I was leading a team of men, almost all older than me. And our chief technology officer at the time, we were running into problems. And he was like, let's not tell the CEO because I think we can fix it. And the problem started getting worse and worse and worse. And we were just like flushing money down the drain. And I was getting more and more uncomfortable, but I was reporting to this executive who was giving me different direction. And it got to the point where I knew I needed to speak up and I didn't want to. And there were meetings. I was in California. There were meetings in New York about my work where I was not invited to those meetings about my project. And this executive was speaking on my behalf. And once I started seeing what was happening, I got to a place where I had to speak up. I called my CEO. I was shaking. I'm like almost shaking now, thinking about how much I was shaking. And I said, I need to be honest with you about this situation and the decisions that this executive is making. I don't agree with it. I think we should go in blah, blah, blah direction. And my CEO said, I'm firing him. And he said, I'm calling HR tomorrow. He's got to go. And it made me feel worse because I spoke up and it impacted someone's career. And 2 weeks later, he was gone. And that was from me using my voice to save the integrity of the project. And it wasn't really about my own integrity, but I couldn't not speak up. And the consequences were real and they impacted someone's life. And that was very uncomfortable. But I just think back to because I was given that seat at the table, I had a responsibility to myself to say what I thought was right, and to the company who had granted me that place to do what was best for them. So not easy.
Extremely brave. Thank you, Alisa. Wow, very transparent. Ladies, you are and have been phenomenal in sharing your stories with the audience. We want to open it up Q&A for the audience. So if you have a question, please do not hesitate to unmute yourself and have at these panelists today. And we also, I do want to thank, before we go there, the video participants. Judith Smith, Ileana Webb, Lucia Manzo, and Claudia Sloan. Thank you so much for participating in this wonderful rule-breaking strategy conversation. And we actually have some of the video participants here with us today. So now we're going to open up to Q&A. Any questions?
Hi, hello. I'm Iris. So thank you all. Great conversation, great personal stories. So my question to all of you is as follows. So different seasons, I think I saw in the chat, and recommendations, suggestions for, Latina, 27 plus years of urban educational experience, and who has been a giver to many, to the community, to the community, which was my other family and my personal community, at home. So new season, recently retired and taking a break, as I heard, to refresh and to regroup, and trying to find that new direction because it is a new season, but looking for enjoyment and fulfillment. Now, a woman of a particular age in her 50s, but still has a lot to offer and to give. Comments, suggestions, recommendations, etc. I've had corporate experience in finance, international banking, like I said, public education. So I see myself continuing in the world of giving, in the arena of just giving to the community. I will never be rich, I know that. But I have richness in other ways. So I look just to overall comments. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Iris. Any panelists want to offer their words of wisdom?
Yeah, and I would also invite, if there's any of the video participants who are just amazing, powerful women, if they want to comment on this too, would love to hear their perspective. For me, I would say follow what you love. You have tons of experience, but at the end of the day, if you do not follow what you love, then you're just going to continue to work for a long time. The other thing that I would say is there are plenty of people that became millionaires late in their career. So don't limit yourself.
Okay.
Love what you do and figure out how to make money.
Yeah.
I really believe that we limit ourselves when it comes to that.
Yeah.
And don't do it. I don't ever want to hear that coming out of your mouth, Dr. Iris.
Yes. Believe it or not, I did set up my consultancy LLC, but I'm trying to figure out my next step, So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Okay. Thank you.
I will also say, Iris, that there is a lot of people who need mentoring. And I think you will be a great mentor. Prospanica has 47 chapters all over the nation, and we need more people like you to mentor more people.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So
if you could just type that in the chat box so that she could use that as a reference point.
Thank you all very much. Yes, I appreciate it.
Any other questions? Don't be shy. Now's the time. Now's the opportunity to ask the hard questions. The questions that's been heavy on your chest and your mind. Think about it. They're in there. Just pull it out.
And you can ask for a friend too.
I would like to make a comment as an ally, right? I think this has brought a perspective of how to support Latinas, as a partner, as a at work, a partner in relationship, personal. So I think this brings a certain vulnerability about not have to be perfect and talk about when is their real problem, because that's when you grow. And I think we need all of that, So I thank you for that perspective.
Oh, and Iris, I just read that you're in my area. I will absolutely leave my email in the chat for you.
But look at what we just did.
Thank you.
Just talked about that need, and you already got a job in Prospanica, Rosa is going to hook you up. This is the power of coming together and really talking about those issues that we really don't like to talk about. It's like, hey, I just finished. I don't know what to do. And look at all the ideas. I'm sure if we stay here long enough, you'll be hired, doing something by someone. So I think it's just such a powerful thing to share those things, ask those hard questions, and leverage this opportunity and this whole network of people right now that can support.
Yes, yes. Thank you all. Muchísimas gracias a todos.
If I could just ask something, I know you guys share very great information. And, one of the things that it came up on the conversation a lot, it was just being open and being honest. But how do you, in situations that you had to be open, being honest at work, or even in your personal life, how do you know when is the right time? Or can you just kind of share some tips then, when you know that you had to be, that you had to speak up and that is the right time to speak up and say something?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if you go back to Alisa's example, for instance, I would say what's at stake? What's at stake for the project in that case? What's at stake in regards to your reputation? What's at stake in regards to you and where you're heading in your career? I think it's a little bit of risk analysis, right? Do your risk analysis and then take the plunge. But take a strategic plunge, right? And there are sometimes, it's funny, the one thing that we've talked about quite a bit as well, I think, and you probably are in organizations that sometimes say, bring your whole self to work. But the thing is, the organization is not ready for you to bring your whole self to work, right? So be mindful that there might be all those subliminal messages that if you take them too hard might actually boomerang and harm you, right? So that's why you have to be strategic as to how you do it. And I would say, and I think if anything coming out of this conversation is about enlisting others, because you can always check in and have somebody who's going to give you feedback and say, hey, yes, someone who can actually do that double check and double take with you, so you're prepared and it's the right time, the right context, and with the right objective.
Yeah. Does that answer your question, Margarita?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's something that, throughout my career, that's definitely something that I have been doing. Just, talking with mentors or family. Is this the right thing? Or am I saying, am I thinking the wrong way? So I think that's a great answer, Rosa. Thank you so much.
Yeah, the one thing I want to highlight is you have to invest in yourself. And, I was going to say Alisa is a coach, but don't wait for anybody to invest in you. I know you said, hey, you go to family and friends and things like that, but there has to come a time where you're like, hey, I call it a catalyst, somebody that gives you a different perspective and pushes you to do something different. Sometimes you need to have that external view to push you in a different direction, because not every time that parent, that family member, or that loved one can be that for you because of our own bias. Right. And it's by saying, hey, I'm working with a professional coach or somebody that can help support me, that can give you that advice, or a mentor. But just wanted to put that out there. I think it's always great to bounce it off. And if you get a professional to give you that expertise, Alisa has helped me. And you heard Alisa, she's a professional coach and she has a coach of her own, because it's something that helps you, push you in a different way and gives you a different perspective.
Awesome. And one thing I will mention too is, I know in Lucia's video, she talked a little bit about personal fulfillment. Having a catalyst and having the mentors and having the advocates, sometimes it can confuse us, because I've been there. But what has really helped me is my intuitive understanding of what it is that's going on and really feeling for what it is that my heart wants, right? My mind is telling me all these things and I'm confused. But if I take a moment and I just sit and listen, you know, and that's hard to do. It comes with practice, you know, it's like meditation or like praying to God, whatever it is, you know, but eventually I feel like, oh, you know, that's it right there. And I'm gonna follow that. And so said it, but it doesn't mean you credit that person with it. It just means that they helped you discover that inner truth, you know?
May I add on? This is Iris again, if you don't mind. And it's so accurate what you're saying, because there's so much in our environment, right, that can be almost sensory overload, even in terms of, you know, people in your lives that mean well. So it's a matter of being in a moment of stillness, right? To really take it in and absorb what it is that's being offered to you, right? What is being said, what's happening around you. So that way you can make a strategic, intentional, wise decision and your next move, right? I always often use the word stillness because we're always on the go, especially in New York.
Yeah, well said. Thank you, Iris. Anyone else want to add to that before we?
I want to thank everyone for being on the call. I want to thank Rosa, Aviles for moderating the panel, Alisa, Rosa, and Merari for contributing this to our chapter, and to all the women for Latinas here today. I'm honored and humbled by their support, and I'm here also to provide the platform through our chapter. So I want to thank you on behalf of our chapter and board of directors.